Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke, but I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
All right, we're back, episode 2 with Pam Doors, and we're about to discuss her babies, her children.
Yes, I have 3 children, thing 1, thing 2, and thing 3. They're all adults now. My oldest is, 32 this year. And then 30 and 28. I just popped those little snots out one after another. It's boy, girl, boy. I used to say it was a girl sandwich, and my husband reminded me that that was not really something you want to say. But yeah. So, my oldest carries my maiden name, as I almost feel like it was a sick nod from me. Still trying to be a people pleaser. And the other 2 have no nods to my family, thankfully. But yeah, they're pretty much great. Well, 2 out of 3. Well, maybe 1.5 out of 3. I have a fantastic relationship with thing 1. Thing 2, I haven't spoken to in a couple of years. And Mr. 3 is being influenced by thing 2. To want to not have a relationship with me. It's a little daunting to have kids that you don't really speak to, but it is what it is.
I wanna blow that up, but talk to me about what happened when your father died. You've already admitted that you've already inadvertently indoctrinated your children. You hear me,
Yes.
Right? I mean that in the best of ways. I did the same thing, so I get it. So Children are indoctrinated. You somehow, and I don't want to discuss this for you, but at what point, after having the children, did you really put a line in the sand with your family? Do you remember anything that, beyond the hotel event? What was the line in the sand with your mother, father, and brother? Because I know when your father passed, you hadn't seen him in about 1.5 years. So what was
Correct.
What was that line in the sand that made? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of. I always put lines in the sand, and they always got erased and got moved.
Right.
But the final straw. I had visited my dad. Oh, I won't even go there. My father passed away. I was lucky enough to be able to see him to try to, for 100% selfish reasons, clear my own mind and let him know that I had remembered and how unfortunate it was that he allowed me to be treated the way I was. But he passes away about, I don't even know, 8 months, a year later, give or take. And I only know that he passes away because thing 2 comes to me and tells me that he has passed away. My own mother didn't bother to call. A couple of days later, I start getting phone calls from our little hometown, including the editor and owner of our little hometown newspaper. And I get a texted copy of the obituary of my father. And instead of saying that he is survived by 2 children, it says that he is survived by 1, which is my brother, and 3 grandchildren, which are my 3 children, and then a great grandchild, which is obviously my son's kid. So I wasn't just exiled from the family. I was created as a non-existence. I didn't exist. My husband didn't exist. My children were given to my brother because, of course, he didn't have any. That's God's best joke ever. And I ceased to exist in the world. And we spoke with the editor of the paper, and unfortunately, you can't change that. And we fought very hard about putting out a correct obituary, but I just decided it just wasn't worth the fight anymore. That's fine. She just clearly showed her true colors. And then she did the same thing in the local paper to where I live currently, and I've lived in this area for 30 years. So the phone calls the next day started all over again. And not everybody knows about my trauma. Not everybody knows about my family, but most everybody knows now, because it just didn't make sense to try to throw the rug over the dust. I had to roll that rug up, vacuum that shit up, and then spit it right back out again and let everybody know who she really was. It was shocking to everybody, including my husband. No matter how many times I would say throughout our 30-year marriage, I don't want to be in their presence. I don't want to be around them. I don't want my kids to be influenced by them, meaning my mother, my father specifically. He didn't disbelieve the things that I shared with him, but I think it was disbelief that it could actually have happened, or that maybe I was a kid and I was exaggerating, or my memory was tricking me, because he grew up in such an idyllic family. Even though his parents were divorced, everybody was amicable, and he spent time with his grandparents and went to church with his grandmother and went fishing with his grandfather, and his uncle took him in like he was his own kid, and he was surrounded by love and all of that. And it was just far beyond his mental capacity to understand that my shit was real. And for our entire marriage, up until the day of the obituary, he would buy cards for my mother's birthday and my parents' anniversaries, and he'd be like, "Here, I got this, why don't you sign it?" And he saw all of it as an adult, how she would rage at me and drink beyond control and just become vicious and mean. And to him it was like no big deal. It just isn't that bad, you're just blowing it up, until he too was erased from existence. And then the gloves were off. He finally figured it out, which speaks to, I guess, how I loved him and my relationship with him more than myself. I don't know. Seems to me like I should have really cut that cord a long time prior, because I needed somebody else to be that shield, right?
Yeah.
But that was the first time that he'd ever stuck up for me to anybody, but especially my mother. And he called her, and it was, God, it put a smile on my face. You would think that it would be like even more trauma, but I had finally found somebody who would stand in front of me instead of behind me, and sort of take the heat.
And you say to finally realize, what's your analogy? You were no longer the target, but what do you?
Well,
you were the target.
Would,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, my father-in-law especially would say, look, you can't have a relationship with your mother. You don't have a relationship with your daughter. You're what's the common denominator here? And my whole thought was, everybody thinks that I'm the sword, right? I'm the one that's out there causing all the bloodshed, but I'm the one I was the target. It was easy for people to come for me somehow, because I wouldn't stand up, and kind of like my dad somehow knowing that he could rage at you and you wouldn't go tell. I feel like I somehow attract people, or I allow people to rage at me, and I don't tell until I did.
May I point something out to you? And to
Please.
You did stand up. You did stand up. You got beaten down even when you stood up too.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah, honey. I mean, you and I talked about how we know when we were children we were both Spitfires.
Yeah, yeah, we were.
And you accounted it you said something about me being a redhead, which I never think about being a redheaded spitfire, but I get it.
Yeah.
No, we did stand up. Just to stand up and be beaten down. You just learn that it's not worth it. And
Yes.
I I don't want to make this about me, but I'm trying to help you, and I understand why you were devoted to your marriage, even though he didn't see it. I mean, it's soul murdering. But what happened was, as a result of that obituary, now he sees it, but now you've got a new problem with the kids because they've been indoctrinated. And I know you said your oldest saw through. If you want to describe that, you can. You don't, you want to say that he just saw it for himself, so he was able to make his own decision.
Yes, he was. Yep.
And you can elaborate, or you can move on to your daughter and what happened to her.
Yeah. So my daughter is basically my mother, just another generation. She had a traumatic brain injury when she was 16. And up until that point, she and I spent a lot of time together. We shared the same interests. We used to travel the country showing our horses together. We did a lot of stuff together. And we were close. We were super duper close. So much so that, other moms would be like, damn, I wish I had that kind of relationship with my daughter. She has this traumatic brain injury.
You want to say how she got it?
Yeah, she was attacked by a horse out in a field. She did the absolute opposite of what I told her to do. Don't go in the field, throw the hay over the fence. I turned around and walked away. The next thing I heard was a screech. I looked outside and she was face down in the snow with a blood halo around her, and this large horse standing with all 4 feet around her. So his front feet were on either side of her head by her ears. His hind feet were down by her feet, and he was nuzzling the back of her neck, but in a bad way. I mean, I say nuzzle, and nuzzle sort of gives a warm, fuzzy connotation, but I knew, because I've spent my whole life with horses, that this was not going to go well. Ran out there, and it was snow and ice, and I tried to pick her up, and I slipped and fell, and then he turned around backwards and double barrel kicked me and missed my head by inches. And I was able to throw her over my shoulder while she was unconscious, trip, fall, but managed to carry and get her out of the field.
I'm so sorry.
But she was unconscious, and she's had 29 surgeries since. Yeah. So anyway, and that was, no phones. It was snow and ice. We, getting 911 here was a shit show. The kids were home from school. My youngest son, unfortunately, had to come out because my cell phone had gotten crushed in all of the things. So he had to run out with another phone from the house, and the poor kid had to see his sister laying on the ground covered in blood, bleeding from her head and her face. It was just another day. So she goes off to college, much to my chagrin, and plays rugby because she's such a powerhouse, but manages to have 5 more concussions. Midway through college, her personality starts to change. She becomes very belligerent. She becomes very combative. She's very anti-parent, especially anti-mom. She has a new boyfriend who's a narcissistic dick. And I hope he hears that. I mean, I've told it to his face, but anyway, she graduates college, moves in with boyfriend, and, wants nothing to do with us. She makes, in her mind, she's got thoughts and things that, just didn't happen. And in therapy, our side, my husband and I talked about the fact that it was likely or largely due to this traumatic brain injury. I mean, she scrambled her eggs, and her reality, while it's her reality, is not our reality. And I suppose that's often the case. But we tried to make amends by explaining that we believe that you believe what happened to you is true. She had stories about how she was crying for hours to her dad about how mean I had been and how I screamed at her and called her a bitch. It was interesting because it was almost my story of what my mother did to me, but she was using it as her own. And her screaming and crying to my husband, it was 3 days later or a week later, Daddy, I talked to you about this. Why aren't you helping me? And he's like, it just didn't happen. I mean, you weren't here. It didn't happen. You were not here with me. It couldn't have happened. So she believes that he and I have just decided that we're going to gang up on her. She got married, I guess it's almost 2 years now ago. And the last conversation I had with her, we knew she was getting married because the boys told us that she was getting married. We also knew that we weren't invited because invites had gone out many months before and we didn't receive one. So it was pretty obvious that she didn't want us there. I mean, okay, I'm going to respect her. She's my kid, but I'm going to respect her. That's what you want. But last conversation I had, she called to remind us and to make sure that she could say the all empowering words of, I don't want you here and you're not coming. And I just want to be sure you understand that. And it broke my husband because he wanted to walk Daddy's little girl, walking her down the aisle. And of course, I didn't get to be involved in any part of, dress shopping or parties or any of that stuff. But I wasn't near as broken as he was. I feel like I've been hardened by all of my past life. And as I said, my husband had never really had to deal with such hatred or crazy or whatever it is. So that was the last time I've talked to my daughter. She's managed to influence the youngest son plenty since. But she's very close to my mom, interestingly enough. They apparently share a common enemy, I guess, which would be me, or a common devil. I'm not sure how they speak about me, but it gives them the commonality and it gives them a very deep relationship to be on either side and me right in the middle.
All right. I want to talk more about that. So when they were little, they didn't know the extent of the problems, but I imagine when you were over your family, your kids knew what you were over to an extent, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to shield them from my trauma because it's my trauma. And I, for some reason, well, mostly because of Rick, wanted my children to try to have a relationship with their grandparents because maybe the target that was on my back from my mother had something to do with her mother and would have nothing to do with my children. And I was correct and incorrect at the same time.
Yeah.
When they were younger, we would try to foster a relationship with my mom and dad. But as they started to get older and were more understanding of things, my mother is the one who threw down the gauntlet because she started to create animosity between my children and me.
Right.
So she would tell the same stories that actually happened. She would leave out the graphic of how terrible it was, but she would flip it on it being my fault and how I created the chasm that was between my brother and I and between her and I. And she would say just enough about the things that had happened to create questions, but she planted the seeds so well that my kids would come home from dinner or lunch or an afternoon at their grandparents with vile and hatred towards me and questions of, she's so sweet. How could you be so mean? And how do you prevent us from having a relationship with our uncle? And you've created this gully or this thing between our family, and it's all your fault, and you're wicked, and we want to go be with them. We don't want to be with you. And it was absolutely my worst nightmare, because I thought I was trying to create a relationship where she would at least leave me out of it and be kind to them. But the opposite happened. So when the kids were probably maybe 10, 12, 14, maybe 8, 10, 12, I had to block my parents' number on the kids' cell phone, all their cell phones, because I didn't want this to continue. Obviously, it was almost too late. I didn't realize what was happening right underneath my nose, because
Right.
who would have thought?
Right.
So, and that really didn't go over very well either. But my kids would borrow cell phones of friends to call my parents. So it continued for some time. How long, I'm not entirely sure. But there was no way, once I opened the Pandora's box of, here are your grandparents, aren't they terrific people? I'm still battling with that decision that I should never have, was my husband. I should never have listened to him. I should have kept my children from them, and I didn't. And I now blame my parents for a majority of the issues that I have with my kids, actually.
You just said so much.
Oh, God.
I can relate so much to, I had a different situation. This is not a time for me, but I made the same decision. And you know about my stuff more than my audience does. So when I had rejected my own family, I then embraced my ex-husband's family, which was the same. So I fucked myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Well,
ways
yeah.
I still can't contemplate, but I think this is what's happening with women in particular. I do believe, and then I want to invite you to stay on with me even when we're done talking about you, because when you and I are done, I intend to talk about estrangement, and if you have the time, stay on. But this is, women are only, I think men have, not in all cases, but men have swallowed abuse and estrangement because of the way we are as a culture. But I think inadvertently, women being so vocal, especially in recent years, starting with explaining physical and sexual abuse and moving into the more covert arena of psychological, emotional abuse, we're kind of in this horrible quandary of, if we tell our story, the fallout's going to be ridiculous. And you just described it beautifully. It's horrible.
Yeah.
But if we don't get the poison out of us, we don't stand a chance of the generations to come. And I'm always very careful with, we think we're starting a cycle, but it's really starting all over. And you just illustrated that as well. I mean, it's heartbreaking. I'm so sorry.
Well, it took me many years and many different therapists talking this all out to finally be told, Pam, it's okay to cut your mother off. Because, you would tell people, oh, yeah, I have troubles with my mom too. But, she's my mom. I love her. She's my mom. And I'd be like, really? I mean, I just don't feel like it's okay for the way she's treated me all these years. And for the final therapist to be like, yeah, you don't have to keep going back. Like, you can just walk away. You know that, right? That was eye-opening. That was heart-opening. That was brain. I mean, that was this whole paradigm shift in my mind of, really? I don't have to keep going back? That was the most empowering moment. But it was also, I think, where the final break was with my daughter and my mother, because when I told my mom, I'm done, you do you, I'm going to do me, have a nice life, I don't need to put up with this anymore. I feel like the first person she called was my kid.
Right.
So, which then, of course, freed me, but maybe shackled my daughter. I'm not entirely sure, but it just flipped the switch.
And it also gave your daughter permission to abandon you.
Yeah.
Because you had abandoned your mother.
Right.
And I don't mean abandon in a negative way. I mean, whether you do it because they deserve it or not. It's still abandonment, and that is also right now, especially with the generation that your kids and my kids are in. By standing up to our abusers, we've inadvertently given them permission to do the same. And the dissociation that they have that you spoke to about memories is equal to our dissociation. Think about what they had to allow their brains to try and wrap it around, because you're asking their brains to essentially forgive people that abused you, that you didn't hold totally accountable till they were grown.
Right.
It's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And
and unfortunately, the kids that still as adults, my son and my daughter, I know that when they come to visit here, they take time away from seeing me. And I know that they visit my parents. Nobody talks about it, but I can't tell you how that drives me out of my mind. Because they take time away from seeing me. And all I wanted to do was protect them. And they take my time to go see the devil. And that really makes me want to lose my mind. But there's nothing, I have no control. And that's probably my biggest lesson out of all of this is I can't control other people's actions. All I can control is my reaction to it. And that's a hard lesson for somebody who is as fiery and intense as I am.
Yes, you are. But that's also what saved us. I mean, that survival instinct that you have it's unbelievable.
Well, laugh or cry, sink or swim. Yeah.
You also say something, and I say it too, but I want you to speak to it, about the shame of being the common denominator. You said that spontaneously when we spoke, and that's often what I say. You may have referenced it earlier. I don't remember if you referenced it earlier in this conversation or from our conversation days ago, but talk about the shame and being a common denominator in all this.
Yeah, so, my father-in-law was the first to say it. But, my daughter has thrown it in my face too. This whole, well, you don't get along with your mother, and my father-in-law would say, well, you don't get along with your mother and you don't get along with your daughter. And my girlfriend and you really aren't best friends. So Pam, the common denominator is you. What have you done? Maybe you should look at who you are and how you treat people. And I've heard that little bits and pieces throughout my life. And I really did for a long time sit back and think, wow, like, what's wrong with me? Where's my really horrible trait that causes me to have these breakdowns in relationships? What's supposed to be the best relationships of your life are things that I can't seem to maintain. And it is shameful because I start questioning who I am to the core. Am I a bad parent? Am I a horrible mother? Am I a bad wife? Have I been a terrible daughter? Am I a bad friend? This is a conversation that I have, I feel like weekly, if not sometimes daily, with myself and some of my ride or dies and my husband. I am not the sword. I am the target. And I feel like
The
maybe
missile.
it's because
The missile.
the missile, yeah. Yeah. Am I not am I am is it the light? Is it what you said, the survival instinct? There's something about me that draws people who want to extinguish the light, who want to put me out for whatever reason. It's not what I am doing to them. It's they see there is maybe a soft, squishy part somewhere that they exploit so that they can take the light, so they can take me down. But it's, for a long time, I spent a lot of time questioning my own soul, my own motives, my own heart. And that's a horrible place to be. But I had to stop because I knew it wasn't me. I mean, I knew that how they portrayed me and the questions that they would ask. How do you not get along with your daughter and your mother? Don't you worry about that? No, I don't. I don't.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. J-Ma.